get started now. On behalf of the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research at Georgia State University, I welcome you to the 7th Annual World Languages Week. Culture, as the center is known, is one of 16 federally funded Title VI language resource centers in the United States, and we are very proud to have one here at Georgia State. Culture has created a unique identity around serving the needs of all students and the communities they represent by helping to promote language learning opportunities as part of 21st century global education. Guided by its core values of access, advocacy, outreach, and research, Culture has gained a national reputation for innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, regardless of their socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds. I am Farah Bernardino, Senior Director in the Office of International Initiatives at Georgia State University, and I'd like to thank you for being here with us today for this language industry panel, which I will be moderating. Before we introduce the panelists, I'd like to address a few housekeeping and technical questions. First, I would like to remind everyone that all the panels will be recorded and are available after the event. All attendees will remain muted throughout the entire session. And if for some reason your connection is interrupted during the panel discussion, simply rejoin with the same link that you used previously. Our panel discussion is approximately 30 to 45 minutes, and it'll be followed by Q&A with you, the attendees. Students may submit questions throughout the course of the discussion or after by typing in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you like the questions you see, click the thumbs up icon to promote this question to the top of the list. Also, if you'd like to address your question to a specific panelist, please include their name as you write the question. This panel discussion will conclude at 3 o'clock. Also, if you hear music in the background, it's homecoming at Georgia State right now, and so you may hear a little bit of background and celebration going on. That's fun university life happening right now. So now let's meet the panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. Marcelo, would you mind introducing yourself first? And then I'll ask Allison and Laura to follow after him in that order.
All right, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor for me to be here this afternoon with such amazing professionals. My name is Marcelo Cedeño. I am currently the president of the Medical Interpreter Network of Georgia, MING. I'm both a court certified interpreter in the state of Georgia and a national certified interpreter. And I work right now as the coordinator of interpreters for Fulton County State Court for Spanish interpreters. And I work as a freelance interpreter for Emory Healthcare. So this is a profession that I absolutely love. I've been an interpreter since 2004, but I started the program in 2003. And this is all I wanted to do ever since. So thank you for inviting me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Furch. I'm the Executive Director of GALA, which stands for the Globalization and Localization Association. And what I do every day isn't as interesting as what our members do every day. And our members are companies that employ people like Marcelo and work with interpreters and translators in the sphere of global business communication. So to make that a little bit more real, think about some headlines that you've seen lately about the translation of Squid Game. So think about Netflix needing to hire a company that's going to do the subtitles and the translation, and then all of the many moving pieces and parts that go into a project like that. So there's an entire industry that focuses on not just entertainment, of course, but life sciences, IT, automotive, aerospace, you name it. Anything where you're doing business in multiple languages, there's a whole industry that addresses that. And that's what our association GALA supports and tries to advance. I'm happy to be here today, so I appreciate you inviting me.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name is Laura Sandoval. I am Operations Manager at Translation Station. Much like you can tell by the name, we work in translation, but we also work in interpretation. A lot of the things that Allison was just discussing. We have been in business since 1998. We're located in Atlanta, Georgia. We're a small business. However, we do work in about 200 languages. We work consistently in about 7 to 8 states across the United States. We work in simultaneous. So if you think of conferences like this, right, that need interpretation, consecutive for medical, school, legal settings, right? So just a little background on me. I started at Translation Station back in 2014, fresh out of grad school at Georgia State. I started out as a scheduler, was able to move up to supervisor. And as I mentioned, I've now been operations manager for about 3 years. We'll talk more about that later on in the panel about what my day looks like. But just wanted to kind of throw in that beyond just being an operations manager at Translation Station, I've also gotten experience and I'm a certified translator. So I have that training and that education in language on the language side too. So it should be fun to talk about it. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Well, now that we've met our experienced panelists, we are going to jump right on into our discussion. So the first segment of our discussion will be focused on student preparation. There are so many students on the call, and many of you may be thinking about how to best prepare yourself to achieve that competitive edge when you start looking for jobs or internships. We just heard about the positions of our panelists. They represent different aspects of the language industry, and they each sound really exciting. So what advice, panelists, what advice would you give to students who wish to pursue a career in a field like you? Are there specific curricular pathways that they should, or extracurricular activities they should explore? And Laura, if you wouldn't mind starting off.
Sure, glad to start off. So I think I'll go a dual way when I talk about this, right? We can look at it from those who are interested in actually doing the language work, right? So linguists themselves, translation and interpretation. So I would say if you're in school, take advantage of any extracurricular activities that are language located or language, about language, right? So clubs, I know a lot of high schools and middle schools have like Spanish club, right? French club. If there's any committees similar. Once you're a little older, also joining a volunteer group, perhaps go to a place that serves a community of interest, right? That could be a place where there are international refugees. You know, if you're interested in Spanish and you really are interested in Latino culture, you know, finding a place where there's a community where you can volunteer there. You know, studying abroad. I know that's a thing that is usually brought up, and that's usually starting at a certain age, but it makes a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be a year exchange, right? For many reasons, that's hard. And there's a lot of barriers to get through here. It could be a 2-week trip, right? As little as 2 weeks, a year or more. But if you get that opportunity, definitely take advantage. That's for your language skills, but it also goes on the other side. You know, if we look at it from the agency side, right, which is like the operations, people that are scheduling, people that are working on the other side, it's good for you to have those interactions with people from other cultures. In general, I think it's good, but especially in this industry, right? If you can take courses on business, right? If you're more interested in that side, on organization, time management, there are actually intercultural communication courses. Maybe that's more in the college scene, but think of that. And lastly, because I feel like I'm going on, if there's an internship opportunity, that can open a lot of doors. And personally for me, that's how I found translation, was doing an internship at a local nonprofit. I was given the opportunity to try my hand at translation, and 10 years later, here I am. So I would say take those routes into consideration.
Marcella, do you want to add in?
Sure. Well, I would say, and I'm going to speak only as a linguist, not from the management, you know, aspect. But my advice is that, you know, once you master the language, you must decide if you want to go into linguistics, what field of linguistics is the one that most interests you. Find where your passion is. Take some classes. As a student, you should have time, or you have time to figure out Why is it that you love, whether you love interpreting or you love translating, or whether you love teaching languages, and even in the field of interpreting itself, decide if you would like to go into legal interpreting, judicial, working with the courts, if you want to go into community interpretation with, you know, with schools, or if you want to go into medical interpreting, if you want to do conference, you may like all of them, but there may be one that you like the most. So find out which one that is. And sometimes you might think, you know, this core interpreting sounds amazing, or being a medical interpreting sounds amazing. I would suggest that you go and check it out first, because, you know, a lot of times we create this fantasy in our, you know, in our head that I'm going to be an interpreter, I'm going to be in court, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then when you go there, you may find out that it's not what you expected or hoped. And it happens the other way around too. A lot of times I have heard from interpreters working in a different field. Let's say, you know, as a medical interpreter, I heard interpreters saying, oh, you know, I could never do court interpreting because A, B, C, or D. But they have never actually been in court. They have never observed what the court looks like. But because of what they think it would look like, or from what they've heard, they've already created sort of a prejudice, you know, in their minds. Sometimes court interpreters would say, I could never do medical interpreting for A, B, C, or D. So find out what you like, and then go and observe, watch, because you may end up realizing that what you thought you were not gonna like that much, you really loved, and I mean, and vice versa. If someone says something to you like, oh, you know, don't go into court interpreting because of this, or don't go into medical interpreting or conference interpreting, or, you know, any of those fields for whatever reason, don't take their word for it. You know, don't take my word for it. Go and find out, you know, on your own, because we all have unique likes and, you know, and dislikes. And so, for example, I know that Laura is a translator. You know, mostly I couldn't do translations because I like to be, you know, active. I like to be out and talking to people. But you know, a lot of my friends, they prefer translating because they like it, you know, to be being at home, or doing it in your own time, not having to talk to a lot of people, you know, etc. That may be something for you. You may think, oh, you know, interpreting may be hard because I had to talk in front of people, but you still, you know, still love languages. So find out and experience before you decide where to go. And if you find that this is your passion, just go ahead and pursue it. And I promise you that if this is really your passion, you will be happy that you chose this profession.
Great, thank you, Laura and Marcelo. Well, as a follow-up to that question, can anyone share other tangible steps students can take while in school to better position themselves to land a job in your field after graduating? Allison, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I think I will echo a lot of what Laura just said. I think definitely take some business classes. And I'm going to say very pointedly to the high schoolers in the audience, I know email is not your favorite medium, but you got to get good at email. Because it is still the mode of communication in business. So take some business classes, marketing, sales. If you're going to go into a career as a freelance linguist, you're going to need to know how to run your own business. If you're going to go and work for an organization or a company, you're going to want to understand the big picture about how all of the pieces and departments are working together. So business is important. Develop your cultural literacy. Laura gave some really good examples about how to do that. Travel, experience other cultures in any way that you can, even if that means watching YouTube videos, because you can't travel, you don't have you know, the money or the time. Find substitutes for those, for developing cultural literacy with other cultures. And then finally, make sure your technology skills are sharp. And I know that, you know, digital natives have definitely an advantage, but this is a really high-tech industry. Don't be misled. A lot of us that are interested in languages think about languages as part of the humanities and part of a liberal arts education. This is a really high-tech space. So you have to be good at technology, take opportunities to learn different kinds of technologies, be super comfortable with it, because absolutely, whether you're an interpreter doing remote simultaneous interpreting or a translator using computer-assisted translation tools or even post-editing machine translation, you got to know tech.
Great. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I can say a few things. So I really appreciated, Allison, what you said about the tech side, because that is something that's overlooked a lot, I think, right? Obviously, if you're wanting to go language side, it's really important to have those language skills, right? But there will be times when you're called upon to use technology, depending on what you're doing to different degrees, right? So going back to language side, right? It sounds kind of obvious, but right, sign up for language courses if that's the way you're going, right? Or at least private tutoring on the outside. Get involved with the community. I know some of these things kind of overlap with what I said before, but just focusing on, you know, the way I got to where I am today and became more comfortable with the language. You know, you can focus on one or two languages to perfect. I just did one. I just wanted to do one very well, but I know there's a lot of talented people that are able to become multilingual. So if that's you, go for it. For high schoolers, I would say if advanced placement courses in language are available, and in general in any of them, right? Take them. That's going to get you college credits, get you ahead in your studying, let you go a little bit further in less time once you are in college. You know, if you're in college or if you're not in yet, maybe it's better to go ahead and decide, you know, do you want to major in the language or do you want to actually focus on something else like business, right? Or communication, but still have that language side, whether through a minor or through, you know, additional courses. Specifically at an agency like Translation Station, right? It's like any other business. There are different departments, right? So it's not all just, oh, there's interpreters and translators, right? We have the people who are scheduling, right? They're the ones who are having to organize everything, receive those requests, communicate with clients and interpreters, right? There's a lot of customer service going on right there. We have people in accounting, right? We, of course, have to end up billing and paying our interpreters. We have people in credentialing. So that's another place where, just so you know, right, just like any other industry, the language industry is becoming more and more standardized, let's put it that way, right? You have to have certain certifications. You need to have certain training. Years ago, just let's say even 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't as, there wasn't as much oversight, right, on it, but a good thing, there's now more and more oversight, more requirements for interpreters, especially like in medical or legal settings, right? So that's what brings us to credentialing, right? We have employees that make sure all of our interpreters' profile or credentials are up to date. Translation, right? That's a different department, at least at Translation Station. We have project managers. So these project managers aren't actually the ones sitting down at the computer and translating, but they are the ones coordinating everything behind the scenes, right? Getting back to the client, setting up our translator, our editor, proofreader, like Allison said, going into the translation management software, setting up those jobs, retrieving the work. There's a lot of variety in this field, whether you think or not. So I did want to mention that as I'm trying to give both sides, but if you're interested in working in this field, like at an agency, but you really like finances, there's a job for you, right? Because everybody needs to have accounting people. So just trying to keep you guys' mind open as you think about getting into the field.
May I add something? I saw that someone had asked in the Q&A, what's the difference between interpreting and translating? And I apologize, I should have said that before. For those of you who don't know, the simple answer is interpreting is spoken and translating is in writing. So you translate books, but you interpret what someone is saying from one language into another. That's the difference. And another thing that I wanted to add, I'm sure you guys have are aware of this, this number, but I think this is absolutely interesting if you guys are thinking about going into the linguistic field. I got this from the US Labor Department, where they're estimating that the employment of interpreters and translators is projected to grow 24% between 2020 and 2030. And they're estimating that it's going to grow much faster than the average for all occupations. They said that about 10,400 jobs opening for interpreters and translators are projected for each year on average over the next 10 years. I think that's absolutely fascinating, so to keep that in mind.
Very interesting. Thank you for adding that, Marcelo. So moving on to the next question, what 2 to 3 qualities, characteristics, or skills do you think are most valuable for success in today's global workforce? Marcelo, could you kick us off with that answer?
Sorry, absolutely. I would say for me, there are 3 essential qualities to be a linguistic. Obviously the knowledge of 2 or more languages, the training, which is essential. But more importantly for me, it's really to have the passion for languages and the passion for this career. I think like with any career, whether you are, a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, as a linguistic, if you don't love what you do, you'll likely get burned out. Even if you're making a lot of money. I mean, if you're in a field that you don't like, even if you're making money, eventually, you're likely to get burned out. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people think, oh, I speak 2 languages because I grew up bilingual. This should be, a nice gig to do because I can use my skills. And, some people take it as a gig. Some people take it, as a profession, or as a career. But if you're thinking about taking this as a profession, training is absolutely important, and love and passion, because otherwise this could be a little bit of a difficult journey. You may enjoy languages, as I said before, you may have the passion for the profession, but you may not like to be, in front of an audience talking, because take in consideration that as an interpreter, I mean, especially as a core interpreter, there will be times where you will be called to interpret for someone on live TV. You may be called to interpret for a trial that is a high profile case and it's going to be televised, and you're going to be the interpreter. Or it may be a case where it may not be televised, but it's a high profile case and the courtroom is packed, and you may be interpreting, at the witness stand. And so if you don't want, all that attention, think about if this is something that you would enjoy. You can go into translations if you, prefer that. But my advice to everyone, if you want to be an interpreter, consider taking public speaking classes, because there will be a lot of times where you're gonna have to be speaking in front of a huge audience. Last year, to give you an example, I was called last minute to interpret for Univision, and I interpret for the governor of Georgia regarding COVID. And that was very interesting for me because I got to do it from English into Spanish in live TV with another interpreter. I've been the interpreter in a few cases that were televised. I've been interpreting for conference too for about a few years, where I've been interpreting for 300 people. So think that into consideration. And as Laura said, if you love languages, there is more than one option. But definitely find a passion and find, as I said earlier, what is it that you really like to do.
Allison, do you
I'd add a couple of things to that. So I think Marcelo brings a good perspective as a linguist. And by the way, interpreters are amazing individuals. Like their brains, I would love to see their brains, you know, on a functional MRI. They're amazing people, superheroes for sure. So in addition, I want to just add general communication skills. If you're going to be in business, either for yourself as a freelancer or for a company, and you're working with people from different cultures and maybe different languages, you're going to need to be an excellent communicator. Just hands down, great communication skills are fundamental in this industry. I'm going to reiterate the email advice here too. Learn how to write a good email. Curiosity is really important in this industry, just like Marcelo gave you examples. If that doesn't interest you and make you curious to learn more, that's probably not the right thing for you. You want to have curiosity and be a lifelong learner, because you will be forced into lifelong learning in this industry. And then finally, adaptability. Because of the advances and changes in technology, this industry is moving and changing very quickly, and people's jobs are changing very quickly. I'm sure Marcelo could tell you more about how COVID changed his role as an interpreter, doing a lot more remote assignments than in-person assignments. So, and technology facilitates that. So you need to be a person who's not afraid of change, who is adaptable and flexible and willing to reskill or upskill or just change the way you do things. I would say, so communication, curiosity, and adaptability, totally essential. Probably for other jobs too, but definitely in this industry.
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to say something real quick. Like if someone wants to go into, you know, into linguistics, as Alison said, you should be, you know, curious about learning. This is a never learning. I mean, you never stop learning. And one of the things that I normally tell people, it's like I have never met a great interpreter or translator who don't love to read. So if you love to read, you are, you know, good to go. And don't just focus on your weaker language. Sometimes, you know, for example, my weaker language is English. So the tendency is like, I'm going to prepare more in English, but it's not like that. You need to constantly prepare yourself in both of your working languages, because you will be surprised like how easy you will forget words in your native language because you're not practicing. So be mindful of that. And reading is the best way to improve your skills, your language skills. And it's also a great tool for us as professionals and as linguists to have access to written information. So.
Thank you. What languages are you looking for when recruiting candidates? Laura, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So I don't think anybody's going to like my answer, but it depends. So as you guys can imagine, right, depending on, let's say it's an on-site request, which literally means, right, we send our interpreters to the physical location. It depends on the demographics a lot of times of the location or of the area, right? So like I mentioned earlier, we're located in Atlanta. Especially if for anybody who's familiar in DeKalb and Gwinnett counties, get a lot of requests for people for languages that are from like Myanmar. There's a big Burmese population there. From Somalia, right? So Somali, from Eritrea and Ethiopia, we have like those kind of languages requested. Now, obviously, Spanish is always good to have, right? There is a high number of Spanish interpreters, but that does not mean that they are all equally trained or all focusing on the same verticals, right? So as I've mentioned, the main ones, at least that we work in, you can go way more granular, right? But we typically just talk about at least the translation station, right? We have education. We have a lot of K through 12 school districts around Atlanta that we work with. Medical, and that is very general. I think I saw something mentioned in the chat, which I won't go there yet, but that is very broad, right? But any range within there. And then legal, of course, which can be anything from a client interview with an attorney all the way to a trial like Marcelo said. And I say all this to say, okay, Spanish, we're always looking for, it can seem very saturated, but you would not believe there are still days that we have so many Spanish requests, right, that it's hard to find somebody available. So always looking for Spanish as well. You know, Translation Station, we offer around 200 languages. And the reason we always say around is because it depends on the status of the interpreter. Are they available anymore, right? Where's the location? Do we offer that language in Nebraska, right? We have a different languages in Nebraska from Georgia that are usually requested. As far as rare languages, always looking for those as well. For example, Karen, which is one of those languages from Myanmar and Thailand, Kinyarwanda, Oromo. The only thing there is that those interpreters, as one would expect, don't get as much work, at least from us, for on-site, just because of the requests we get. However, for other modes, right, or for other ways of accessing interpretation, which could be video or phone, right, you can stay busy. There are quite a few very large agencies in the United States, or interpretation agencies specifically, that focus more on video and phone. And I know they're able to keep their interpreters busy. So my answer was kind of generic, but basically any and all languages are welcome, are needed, depending on where the location is, the mode, you know, just what we're needing in that moment. So if you speak one and you feel like maybe there's not a high demand and you're interested, you know, it's probably your native language in that case, right? Because there's not a lot of Burmese or Kinyarwanda classes or courses, right? It's usually some native language. Go for it, look into it, and you will definitely find work if that's what you dedicate yourself to.
Yeah, 100%. I want to add on to what Laura was saying and expand it from interpreting to also translation. So from where I sit, this is quite a remote industry. So interpreting, you still have assignments where you have to be on site, but translation is never on site. And so we have, you know, languages, you could be a Farsi speaker in Cleveland and be working for a company that's based in Tehran. So, you know, any language, all languages are needed, and there's so much content. Think about the content that's produced every day, just on the internet. You know, you're not even talking about what companies are producing. If we go back to the Netflix example, think about all their shows and how many languages they're, you know, doing subtitles or captions for. And so the beauty of this industry is that there's a place for everybody. If you're a heritage language speaker and you're not fluent, maybe you're going to be in sales, maybe you're going to be in project management, maybe you're going to be in IT, but your language is going to come in handy. And because so many jobs are remote, you can't let kind of the local languages dictate necessarily the demand, because there could be a ton of demand, but you going to be doing it for a company based in Amsterdam, let's say. And then this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but I would say JavaScript, you know, or React, like coding languages are also really important in this industry. I'm going to say that again, super high tech industry. And, you know, you get like the super nerd computational linguist PhDs that are writing the algorithms for machine learning and machine translation, but you've also got, you know, the people that are building translation management systems. And, you know, just to kind of give you one more, it's like anchor for your perspective here, you know, Marcelo is a linguist, right? And he works for different companies that need his services, and those companies have different departments. It's like Laura was saying at the beginning. So just remember, it's not all about the linguist role. There are, if you like languages and you like culture, there's so many other possibilities as well.
May I add something real quick also? So it is true that there are a lot of Spanish requests. So if your language is not Spanish and you think, well, maybe this is not for me because, you know, I'm not going to have a lot of work if I speak, you know, Farsi or you know, or something else. Let's say you want to go into interpreting, and this may be something that you want to do, or you may be required to go, you know, in person. Well, I will tell you this though, for core interpreting at least, there are very, very, very few interpreters from other languages who are certified. So I know someone she's the only certified interpreter in Georgia for both Mandarin and Cantonese. And so because she's the only one in Georgia, she charges a lot, and she travels all over the country. Like they pay for her flight, hotels, and she charges basically, whatever rate she wants, because she has no competition. And she's also the pioneer of Chinese certified interpreters in Georgia. So if you come from, or if you speak a language other than Spanish or other than the ones that you think will be most requested by providers, if you have the right training and the certification, there will be a lot of doors that will open no matter what language you speak. Because once you become certified, people will prefer all the core systems, all the big clients will prefer a certified interpreter. And if you're the only one, you'll have plenty of jobs.
Thank you. Well, I see we have a lot of questions coming up into the Q&A. I'm going to ask the panel one more question, and then we'll transition over to the Q&A, just in the interest of time. So the next question is, what does a typical workday look like at your organization? Marcelo or Laura, would you like to respond?
Well, I can go first. So I'm a freelance interpreter, but as I said earlier, I work for Fulton County State Court here in Atlanta, and I coordinate, all the Spanish interpreters. And what I love about my job is that there is no such thing as a typical day. I personally love just the variety of cases that one gets to see, the people that I meet. But basically, so this is before COVID. So I want to tell you how my day was before COVID and during COVID. Before COVID, I used to basically get to the courthouse in downtown Atlanta between 9 and 9:30, and I would check all the courtrooms, every judge, and I would write down the people who would need my services, and then I would make a round and come back and interpret. Fulton County Court or Fulton County State Court, where I work, we don't have a huge demand for Spanish interpreters, because most of those cases are resolved in city court. So when there are only a handful of cases that get to the state court, and so one interpreter normally is enough to cover everything. But I have a shift. I go, as I said, at 9 o'clock, 9:30. I never know if I'm gonna be done at 2 or 3, at 4, but sometimes I would be done by 11, and I would have the rest of the day off. And because they pay me a minimum salary, it doesn't really matter. I mean, matter if I leave at 11 or I leave at 2 o'clock. So that's something that it was excellent and pretty cool about my job before COVID. Well, now it's even better because I just go into the computer. Sometimes I check in 10 minutes and they don't have anything, so I go right back to sleep. And also, I know Laura is in Ecuador right now. I'm from Ecuador, and I recently went for 2 weeks, and I had the chance to work from Ecuador, because I learned that now they have fiber optic internet, optic fiber, and so everything is fast. And for me, that was great, because I no longer have to be here, 24/7. If I can work remotely, I can do it, or you can do it from basically anywhere, in the world, as long as you have internet access. And I think the whole virtual interpreting is here to stay. It's going to be a hybrid. I know several attorneys have told me I would never go to a deposition in person ever again, because it's just so much easier. So you have that flexibility. That's my day. When I go to the hospital, I work there once a week, and we have an office, and we get calls and from doctors or nurses, and we go and interpret for patients. And that's also amazing for me, because one of the things that I love about working in the hospital is, as I normally say, greatest human beings in the world working in the hospitals, doctors and, you know, nurses, people who really care for other people, who have, you know, empathy. You see them there as a group trying to make people better. And for me, that energy is incredible. It's something that I find very, you know, appealing as well. And it's something that allows me to sort of balance some of the stuff that I see in court, even though now I'm only doing misdemeanors. So I don't get to see any big crimes. But being in a hospital, even though sometimes you see people being sick and what have you, but also the interaction between medical providers and people who work in the hospital, it's absolutely, you know, amazing. So that's kind of how my typical days are.
So we want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, but Laura, do you want to briefly respond to that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go real quick. So just to kind of piggyback off what Marcelo was saying, we all work remotely now, right? That was not normal for my company. I know there are a lot of interpretation and translation agencies that were already there, but we were just kind of pushed into it because of COVID, and we're actually thinking it's here to stay. Because of that, I am able also to work from pretty much anywhere as long as there's good internet. So my day, of course, looks different from Marcelo's, right? I'm, of course, more on the business side, the admin side, but because, at least in my case, right, we have different departments, which we've discussed, and I've actually worked in almost all of them over the 7.5 years I've been with Translation Station. I have been able to learn how to do different things. So pretty much my day from one day to the next is not ever the same. It typically doesn't go as planned, meaning I might think that I will be able to get all these things done, but I might have to jump in on because there's a scheduling problem, right? Or there's a special request from a client, or now we have a huge translation project. And even though I am operations manager, I've kept my feet in translation just because I do enjoy it so much. So I might spend a little bit in the afternoon formatting a translation or reviewing the Spanish translation, right? So every day is different. You know, I can't say that necessarily for every position here, right? But, you know, recently we were hiring and we found a great new scheduler on the interpretation side. And we wanted to make it very clear, right? This is an office job, right? We're working from home, but it is not boring. It is anything but boring, right? You are going to always see some new situation, some new request, some language. You thought you've heard of all of them and you're going to get a request for this language. You have to Google, and guess what? It does exist. And now you have to try to find somebody who speaks it, right? So every day, yes, it's office, it's emails, right? It's all of that. But there are a lot of fun things that can happen as well. So every day is different.
Great, thank you. So moving over to our Q&A, and it looks like we have a lot, which is wonderful. That means our audience is really engaged. And just a reminder to the students, give it a thumbs up if you're also interested in hearing the answer to that question, and that will, you know, move it up to the top. So the first one, which was really popular, this one's for Allison. Allison, can you give some examples of specific software used in the industry?
Sure. It's going to depend on your role at the company. So let's start with translators. Translators use CAT tools or computer assisted translation tools. Those can, they usually include different things like terminology or term bases, a couple of examples that you can Google. And by the way, a lot of these have free licenses for students. So you could possibly, even if you've got a student account like a .edu, email, you could possibly download them and play with them. So MemSource, it's just like it sounds. And I can type this into the chat too when I'm done, but MemSource, SDL Trados is probably like first to the market, you know, 30 years ago, and is still dominates the market. MemoQ is another one that a translator would use. If you're a project manager, you're probably going to be using a translation management system. Examples of those would be one called XTM Cloud, or Plunet. That's more of a business management one, so you can do invoicing and that kind of stuff too. XTRF is another project management type system. Then you've got other kind of, I mean, not esoteric, but obviously tons of machine translation systems now. And this is a whole new, look, like if you're a data nerd, if you're into data, that's the direction this industry is going in. Okay, language data and training data for machine translation. Think about where voice recognition is going. Like, we all talk to our phones now, right? And Siri's getting smarter and smarter. Why? Because there's a lot of training that's going on to kind of tool these algorithms. So again, with the technology, if you are interested in language and culture, but tech is your thing, this is a great place for you. So machine translation engines, then you've got like remote interpreting platforms like Interprify or Kudo. There's the technology landscape is super rich, and I'll type I'll put a link into the chat where you could see this atlas. There's a kind of a consulting firm in this industry that puts together like an atlas of tech. So I'll stop there, give you some examples. I'll give you this link and you can do a little bit more research on your own.
Great, thank you, Allison. The next question is, are there full-time interpreter or translator positions that work for one company with benefits, or is this more of a freelance independent contractor industry?
For interpreters, right? Yeah, there are jobs out there. There are some counties or some courts that will hire full-time interpreters, staff interpreters. There are hospitals who will hire full-time medical interpreters. As far as agencies, I don't know. That's something that probably Dora can answer. But I mean, yeah, there are jobs with benefits, out there. In my case, I've done freelance my whole life because I like the flexibility, and that's what I've done. But if you're looking for a full-time job or a part-time job with benefits, there are plenty available.
And if I could, just to follow up on that, like Marcela was saying, so where I work, we are freelance based. So we don't have any full-time employees that are the interpreters and the translators. Everything's on an independent contractor basis, which Marcelo mentioned, right? Many people do like, just because of that flexibility, meaning we can say, hey, do you want to take this job? And they can say no, and it's not a problem, right? There's nothing wrong with that. You just let us know yes or no. There are agencies though, if you're interested in working with an agency, right? If you can't find a court system or a hospital or a school system, right? Like Marcelo was mentioning, that is hiring full-time, there are agencies that do work with full-time employees as linguists. I don't know any that are at least in the Atlanta area. I do know there are a lot in California. I know that this is going to be nationwide. In California, I'm pretty sure that interpreters and translators have to be employees now because of a recent law. But across the US, I believe there are agencies that offer that as well.
Great. A few people are interested in knowing, how much does an interpreter or a translator earn?
Well, that is really hard to answer because that will depend on a lot of factors, the type of contract that you get, the type of client that you can get, or I mean, if it's an agency, if you do conference interpreting, if you do core interpreting, and I mean, everyone gets paid differently. Just like if you are out there searching for a lawyer and you're getting quotes, you'll get different quotes. But just to give you an estimate, I know medical interpreters, depending on if it's freelance or if you work for a hospital, can make anywhere from maybe $15 to $45 an hour. Core interpreters can make anywhere from, I mean, depending if you have a certification, anywhere from $50 to $100, $120, $150 an hour, depending. If you work as a conference interpreter, they usually pay you either by the day or half a day, and it's usually a flat fee, and that would also depend on on the company that hires you. It could be anywhere from $500 a day to $2,000 per day. That's there's a range of prices.
Okay, and so another question for medical interpreters, is there specific training for medical terminology? Are the medical interpreters typically hired by the hospital or contract workers? Please provide response in the chat. So maybe you can say a little bit, maybe they want to follow up in the chat as well.
Well, there are a lot of work for medical interpreters. I mean, through agencies as a freelance, but also, you know, as staff interpreters. There is more of a volume in medical interpreting than there is in court because, you know, we have, I mean, at least here in Atlanta, I'm talking about, or in the state of Georgia, there's just huge healthcare systems, and they have tons and tons and tons and tons, you know, of interpreters. So there are hospitals in the Atlanta area that have 45 full-time interpreters, 50 full-time interpreters, 60 full-time interpreters. So there is a lot, and they're always looking for more. So sorry.
No, go ahead, finish.
No, I was gonna say, as far as a specific training to be a medical interpreter, there is a 40-hour class, which you can Google online, 40-hour class for medical interpreters. And once you get that 40-hour class, that's like the basic requirement to start working as a medical interpreter. And for court interpreting, it would have to be through the Georgia Commission on Interpreters here in Georgia, or the Commission on Interpreter in your state. And usually they have all the information published on, you know, the cost and what to do and the schedules and all of that.
Exactly. And just to add one more thing, I did want to mention, Marcelo, since I believe, are you the president of MEING, so the Medical Interpreter Network of Georgia, right? That's a local association, at least here in Atlanta, that focuses only on medical interpretation. So they're just one example, right? There are groups like this all over the US that have special sessions and meetings and glossaries and anything, references, right, to become more familiar with specific different I guess, terminology within medical interpretation.
Right. And just so the Medical Interpreter Network of Georgia, we do provide training for medical interpreters, but we provide continuing education. So once you're a medical interpreter, but even if you're just, you know, in the field and you're trying to learn a little more, we normally have training sessions every 3 months where we'll have one presenter come and do a class or a presentation, and if you need the continuing education credit, you'll get that hour. But as far as for to get started with the education, we don't provide that, but there are agencies and organizations out there that do provide the 40-hour class that is required to work as a medical interpreter.
Thank you. One more question, I think, is all we'll have time for. It is, what is the best path to follow after college to get into interpreting or translation?
So I can go really quick on translation. And Allison may have more to add, I'm not sure, but I did want to give translation a little spotlight here. So I would say it can seem hard to get into translation. We always say, at least in the industry where I work, at least, that, you know, the language industry is like the biggest industry that nobody's about, right? That's why we have these things, so people know it exists, right? But as far as translation, I would say specifically you're interested in the writing side, right? Translation. There are a handful of universities and colleges throughout the United States that offer those courses. So since we're doing this through Georgia State, right? Georgia State does offer an interpretation and translation certificate. You can choose between the two, whatever's being offered in Spanish. They may do other languages depending on enrollment, but that's actually where I got my graduate certificate in translation. I believe there's Middlebury Institute. I'm forgetting all of the names of all the places. Okay, good, all of the places. But I would do some specific studying on translation, focus on writing, right? Because if you think about it, you can be good at a language, you might understand what it's saying, but specifically with translation, it needs to be readable, it needs to be enjoyable, it needs to be reflecting, right, what the original was looking like. So I would look into the different courses. They're usually going to be a graduate certificate program, but there are some degrees, I believe, too, very limited for translation.
For sure. And actually, in the US, you're right, there's not as many. I'll try to drop a link before we end. Gala, my organization, has about 50 academic members. around the world that offer some kind of a degree program or certificate program. It is a good idea to, I mean, you have to advance your studies unless you have an undergraduate degree in translation. You're going to need to do some additional coursework. I think I put it in the chat too. Don't be shy, you guys. This industry is full of really like nice, generous, interesting people. We all want to attract more talent to this industry because it's greatly needed. And so, you know, ping somebody on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm interested in this career path. I wonder if you could make 30 minutes for me and I could ask you some questions. You know, do that. You'll get some really great advice. But yes, like Marcelo and Laura pointed out, training is essential. You can't just hang a shingle and call yourself a translator. Well, you could, but you're probably not going to get the same kind of jobs. Really great questions in the Q&A. I wish we could get to them all. You guys are thinking along the right lines and asking the right kinds of questions. And I think that's encouraging from my perspective. Really want to say one more thing before I stop talking. And that is, you know, if you think that the intersection of culture and technology and language and business is a cool place to be, then you're looking in the right place.
Great. Well, I just want to say a big, big thank you to our panelists today for the insights that you've shared and for your time. To our students, hopefully, you know, you've learned something today. Maybe you didn't know about a career that was shared today, or maybe you just gained a better understanding about it. We wish everyone on the call the best of luck as you prepare yourselves for the many successes that you have ahead. I want to make a reminder that the recordings of all the panel discussions this week will be available after the event. I also invite you to complete the post-event survey that will be available right after this Zoom session closes. This concludes our language industry panel today. Also, a reminder that the next World Languages Week event is tomorrow. It's the Global Scholar Distinction Panel, and it'll take place tomorrow at 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.